Hi hobby friends, how about that Trench Crusade, huh? Yes, like many hobbyists, I was bitten by the alt history grimdark bug of Trench Crusade when their Kickstarter hit the big time at the end of last year. And the push that sent me down the purchase precipice was this brutal defender of the Principality, the heavy mechanized infantry of Antioch. And while I greatly admire Francina, Perinin and Co.'s embracement of 3D printing, there is one major downside to this futuristic tech. Those horrible, illusion-breaking layer lines. Even on an excellently printed mini, printed by my good friend over at DAF Makes, see links below for awesome mini marines and adorable shark minis, these pesky layer lines still show up. I actually did some work removing them on this guy, scraping with a hobby knife and sanding them down before I realised I was being presented with the perfect opportunity to test a technique that's been lurking in the back of my head for some months now. A little while ago I bought this stuff, Vallejo plastic putty, and while my motivation for buying it was to try and ease the perennial pain of gap filling, like a good little hobbyist I took the time to watch their guide video and learnt about alternative uses, the main thrust being you can use it to texture surfaces. Well then, time to texture. One huge benefit of this product, and others like it I guess, is its water solubility. Anything water-based immediately scores extra points in my books as it makes cleanup and general handling so much easier. On my little palette there, I've splooged out a blob of the putty, thinned it down with a little water, and then I'm using an old brush to apply it all over my big boy's armour here, looking for a random rough texture. This stuff will eat your brushes for breakfast, lunch and dinner, so leave the new Kolinsky Sables in their case and grab yourself an old or cheap brush instead. Using the paste thinned down a little like this should help us achieve a slightly finer texture and extends the working time a little too. You'll notice I'm applying the paste in small areas rather than slathering the whole thing at once. This is because the application is actually a two-step process. First, we stipple on the fairly wet paste, making sure we get some texture on there, but not getting too precious about things. And then, after the paste has had an opportunity to set up a little, we need to go back in again with a clean, fairly dry brush and work on refining our texture. This second pass will take the texture from looking like a splodgy and, for want of a better word, liquidy mess to looking like the fine, rough knobbliness of a piece of cast metal. Also, I'm concentrating on the area around the head, chest and arms for the most part. This isn't because I'm lazy, or not only because I'm lazy, but also because, like with the painting of minis, I want to concentrate the viewer's attention where it matters, giving the figure a sense of dynamism. Varying your level of detail, i.e. paying more attention in the painting and texturing of the mini to the important parts, will help achieve that sense of motion and life. When the first layer was touch dry, I jumped in again with some undiluted paste this time to really shore up the texture along that core line running through his hammer arm, head and down his forward leg, and also along that shield. I gave all of that about 30 minutes or so to dry, but your mileage may vary, so make sure it's completely cured before you start the next stage. Now, I'm guessing you clicked the thumbnail for the texturing stuff, so I won't labour this section too much, but if you think other folk might get something out of this info, stick around and let the algorithm know you like what you're seeing by watching to the end. Oh, YouTube. First stop, Browntown. Regular viewers will know I tend to eschew black base coats, and this chap is no exception. I am keeping things a little more muted than usual, however, as Grim and Dark are the name of the game and muddy trenches are where we're playing. Over the environmental base colour comes the theme colour I've chosen for my Antioch Special Forces, a muted blue, hopefully reminiscent of the staid navy of certain historical British uniforms. All the paints I use are listed in the description, by the way, so check that out if you want to reproduce any of this. Time to light this guy up, first with a pass of Pastel Mint, focusing on the volumes that would catch the light, and then reinforcing those lights with some off-white focused in the centre of the highlights. At this stage, you can see how I've pulled through that central line of focus I was talking about earlier, and you can really appreciate the texture now that there is some light information on there as well. He's looking a little washed out though, so let's tie things together with a transparent overcoat of a dark desaturated blue. We can't just blast the whole thing all over though, it's important to keep things controlled and focus that deep blue where we want to modulate the shadow. In that vein, I also loaded up a blue-grey contrast style paint as well, layering that on the highlight areas to tie things together. If this technique of chromatic underpainting with transparent overcoats interests you, check out, well, basically any of my other videos, as it's my go-to approach for painting and gets pretty striking results in short order. After tidying up the base and hammer handle with some precision brown spraying, we are well on our way to a battle-worthy mini. Some Vallejo Model Color Gunmetal will make quick work of the chainmail and other metal elements, and at this stage I certainly should have painted in the marking elements of the mini, but I fairly mindlessly wandered into the oil and weathering stage instead. I am trying my best to keep things relatively snappy here, so I won't go into too much detail, but as simply stated as I can muster, the approach is to select some appropriate colours, apply those in tiny little dots on the mini, and then, taking a large soft brush dampened with thinner and dried out pretty thoroughly so that only a minuscule amount of thinner remains, we swoosh and smoosh and blend the dots together. Work in small areas so the oils don't dry out and leave unsightly spots, and you should end up with beautiful, subtle modulation all over your otherwise big and plain surfaces. While the oils were out, I also took the opportunity to reinforce some definition with a simple pin lining in a dark, almost pure black. You can also pull down some of the wet or semi-dried patches of black to create staining and streaks as well. Time for details, starting with those force markings I should have done earlier. A simple red stripe, probably representing the blood of some martyr or something, and my chosen cruciform symbol for these Antioch elites applied in a freehand of questionable quality, and then we can move on to the last stage, chipping. Or we would, but as is tradition amongst well-intended but underskilled YouTube creators, a large chunk of footage was lost, so you'll have to take my word for it when I say that I did indeed start the chipping with a pass of very light grey before I moved on to a nearly black dark brown. That first pass in the light colour represents where the paint has chipped to the undercoat, and this next pass represents where the damage has broken all the way through to the metal. As such, I'm generally keeping my application of this dark colour to the middle of the light chipped area. The key here is to have a relatively flowing paint consistency, so diluted as much as the paint will take without becoming thin or transparent, but then making sure you clear all that excess paint on a towel or the back of your hand so that it comes off the brush relatively dry. It's a delicate balance, but play around until you have just the right consistency and load to get a responsive, controlled reaction out of your brush tip. Finally, with some red oxide orangey brown, pretty heavily watered down, we can go into just a few select dings and nicks and add some fresh rust. Be sparing at this stage, we don't want to overwhelm that grim mood with too much zingy orange. And guess what? That was that. What do you think? Have I done God's own proud? Let me know down below. Hit the like if you liked, sub for more painting stuff, use the thanks button to buy me a coffee if you feel so inclined, check the description for links and extra info, and I will catch you all next time. Cheers.